We'll move on to our action items for this evening and start with a motion for acceptance of A1, A2, approval of minutes and policies for first reading.
So moved.
Mrs. Becker? Mrs. Howard, is there any discussion? Mrs. Lax?
I have a question, excuse my ignorance. For the grading system, the cross out here for grades 4 and 5, because I know the grading system we had changed a while back, so I was a little confused by this because this looks like an A through F system, but then it was
being phased out, though.
oh, is that what it, okay, because I was going to say, I
Yeah.
know that's not current. Okay, so that's what this is reflecting, what we did a couple of years ago?
When the report card first came in, we started it on a more limited basis, and then
Okay.
students who, aged out and went on to Hammarskjold, we are now introducing, a more, what do we call that, Dr. Ogden? Standards-based.
Standards-based report card.
See, I know it after all. But anyway, so it was just part of the process of transition.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I don't really have any more questions, but I think it's important for folks to realize that the major change that we made in the grading system policy is to, in fact, do away with final exams this year. And as time goes on, we are likely to eliminate the midterm exams as well. And we felt during our discussion in the policy committee that over-testing of kids seems to be a major concern of parents. And one of the things we discussed is that, over a period of years, we have started to teach kids differently. They are learning differently. The ways to evaluate kids has changed and shifted. And anyway, I think the fact that we are providing, I believe it's quarterly exams.
Quarterly assessments.
Assessments, we no longer really need to rely on the midterm exam and the final exam to give us information that we are already going to have based on the assessments that we currently give kids, as well as the PARCC exam as well.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes, we had this had originally come to the curriculum committee, and as Mary has mentioned, there was a concern about over-testing. Just want parents to realize this is for grades 9 through 12, and we are going to be gaining 4 days of instructional time by the elimination of these exams, which our staff was thrilled about. Dr. Ogden had let us know at the time that quite a few other districts have started doing this. Some of the top high school districts in the state, of course, which we are one, and that this was unanimously supported by the curriculum committee, and we're very grateful to the policy committee for coming up with that awesome wording to say what I just said in policy form. When are the children going to be informed of this?
I think they just won.
Well,
Well, but
as soon as you approve this change.
tomorrow, I imagine there will be a cry of relief and joy that will go up throughout the town, particularly in the areas of Churchill Junior High and East Brunswick High School. So, thank you, Dr. Ogden, for really doing the research on this and proposing this idea. As always, thinking of what's best for the kids. Thank you.
Mr. McAvoy?
I do not have, I was looking through as well, I don't have the minutes from the meeting, so can you tell?
I don't either.
Right, you're going to
Curriculum
tell,
policy.
you're going to tell me that Dr. Vanilla and Mr. Suter were both full steam ahead with ending final exams?
Yes. And there were minutes.
They were in
The
packet.
minutes are, oh, I
I'm
was
just looking for the
referring-
members on,
Yeah.
so what are the other principals that are on that committee then? Not that they're, no, you're telling me that Vanilla and Suter were on board right from the get-go.
Dr. Ogden, I believe, is next to you nodding that she had conversations with,
Yeah, there were conversations with administration, of course, with Dr. Vanella is on the policy committee specifically, and also with Mark Suter prior to that.
we also had half a dozen of the
teachers.
academic supervisors there.
Plus there were teachers at the
But
training meeting.
the curriculum supervisors were all in favor of this.
Okay. If we didn't have this lengthy park discussion that's been going on this entire year, there would be no discussion about ending midterm and final exams. I'm well aware of the attitudes that are out there regarding park over-testing, and I could go on and on. One thing that is very clear is that the students who graduate from our school system, when they would come back as freshmen and sophomore, by the time they're junior, they're fading away, they would repeatedly tell us how well the school district prepared them for college, primarily because of the English department, who taught them how to write well, and the midterm and final exams that prepared them for taking their own midterms and finals in the collegiate world. So, and I'm fully aware of Jim Grisfield up in Milburn talking about getting rid of midterms and finals. And then there was Ron, I'm not sure if his first name was Ron, but Superintendent Osborne up in South Orange Maplewood, who left the state of New Jersey to go up to New Rochelle. He too was voicing his concern that the mandate out of Trenton was causing such a disruption in the school so as to cause the need for the 4 days that Mrs. Becker referenced. I just want it to be known that I'm totally against this. Totally against this. So I hope Park falls flat on its face so that we can return to midterms and finals in the relatively near future.
Kevin, I think that a lot of what you're saying, we talked about as a committee and
Bet you
had the
did.
same concerns, and that what you're saying is very, very valid. Part of what made us able to come to a decision to recommend it to the board was the fact that we did talk about, as Mary had referenced, the quarterly exams will become much more rigorous. Well, they're going to have to, and that the grading system, the percentages that we're relying on the midterm and finals will be redistributed. But I agree with you about the feedback from kids about being prepared for midterms and finals, but I think particularly once they get to the high school level, when we have so many students participating in AP classes, which the AP exam will often function like a final, the SAT 2 subject courses, which are a culmination of a curriculum, I feel pretty confident that our kids are going to be well-versed enough in testing and preparing for testing. I don't think it's the actual test so much that the kids feel good about in college, but the fact that they know how to prepare for something. And the fact that we start teaching them how to study and research in third grade. And I think that continuity is what gets our kids to the point, not the actual exam. That's my opinion, and you always give me a good perspective on things because of your many years' experience as a teacher. So I'm certainly not negating what you said, but I hope to share a little reassurance with you. Maybe not.
Thank you, Mrs. Becker.
You're welcome, Mr. McAvoy.
Dr. Walensky?
Well, I just wanted to say to Mr. McAvoy and maybe for the rest of the board, when Dr. Ogden approached me about this, my first reaction was, And then as we started talking about it, I'm convinced that we have the repository of assessments in what we do here at East Brunswick. We can craft rigorous quarterly assessments, but I also realize it's going to be a change for the professional teaching staff to move from a midterm final format to a quarterly assessment. But I believe we can do it and do it effectively.
There's no doubt that the change in education with regard to how things are being taught, why they're being taught, and I could go through a whole litany of things. Forget the crossroads. The train has left the station. And so I understand that there is such a new wave in what's going on that maybe even at the university things will change. However, for the time being, I've been anti-park since the day I took this seat. The reason I am anti-park is because I'm anti-mandates, and if we didn't have this mandate, we wouldn't have this discussion. Don't want to belabor the point. Thank you, Dr. Cohn.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We'll take a roll call.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
No.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes, are we also voting on
A1 and
A1? Okay, so in A1, I need to abstain, and I'm voting yes on the remainder.
And Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I'd like to then have a motion for items B1 through B8.
So moved.
Second?
Becker, Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion? Mr. McAvoy?
Could I get clarification on B5? This may be the first, not the first time that I'm seeing this, but just for the community. I understand we approve a contract with Unify. I don't know if that's...
Dr. Ogden, do you want to address that?
Dr. Ogden, just a couple of...
I'm just trying to find B5. My Chrome seems to be frozen there.
Dr. Ogden?
Never.
The intense training of the Unified Assessment System.
Performance Matters is the whole system we use for working with our own assessments. We talked about we have 2,500 assessments related to our 500 courses that are teacher, developed and refined in department, and we're able to look at that data and look on a regular basis in terms of on-the-fly improvement of program and services. Part of this program, what this training was it allows our teachers in developing assessments, whether they're quarterly assessments or assessments for second grade, to make those assessments more alive and interesting so that you can incorporate perhaps videos in them. Rather than just, the multiple choice kinds of items, and just make them potentially more interesting and more aligned with what we're doing. So this was a training session for the administrators in terms of how to develop those administrators, and there were teachers as well involved in that. that are interested in developing assessments and have been working on this for a couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to make a note on item B3, where the recommendation, it should read old name Chem-Com and proposed name Chemistry.
Chemistry A, correct?
Just chemistry.
Just
Just
chemistry.
chemistry, not chemistry.
Okay.
I have one more, Dr. Cohen.
Mr. McAvoy.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at, under B8, I guess it's Model UN,
Field trip approval.
right?
Right.
Wow, $9,500 defrayed by the students, so congratulations to a lot of car washing and fundraising, or if that is, parents cutting checks.
It is.
And then the board funds, 1961 and 83 cents. So we're sending, $2,000 for the Model UN. Do we help fund other field trips? Do we partially fund second graders going to the Bronx Zoo? Is this the only field trip? So we've become so tight with money that this is the only gig in town that gets,
For years,
yeah.
unfortunately.
And this is for overnight, right?
Yes.
Yes.
These are the expenses for overnight, it's not,
Mrs. Becker?
Kevin, having been on the Finance Committee for a long time, what started happening is that as state aid was decreased, and we had to make some tough decisions, we decided to preserve programs like our athletic program. We are one of the few high schools in the state that did not cut at least one JV or freshman or eighth grade team in any of our sports in like the last 10 years. We were one of the only ones, and I actually had that statistic from Mr. Knoppenberger. But we had to, things that we always paid for, we had to stop paying for in order to meet our contractual obligations and to provide everything else that is required to run the district. So we had to start passing along the costs to the parents. And what we would explain to them at budget presentations is, if you have a child doing Model UN or IPPL, if they're playing sports or clubs, and there's the fees for that, you are paying 4 or 5 times a year more than what you would pay for an increase in the taxes to support those programs. But unfortunately, that message was not able to be conveyed successfully to the community, so we were left with no choice.
Well, if you want to swing it over to sports, you're talking about your son or daughter who is doing 3 seasons, so there's $75 a season, and maybe there's some discount for three, if you do
No,
3
I think it's
seasons.
more, right?
But then you also have the Booster Club that wants X amount of dollars.
Right,
Then
yeah.
you're still doing your fundraising or your candy sales or your car washes, so I understand it. It's just unfortunate that, and I go back to this, well, that's the way it is since the economic crisis, and I understand that. But this is,
It's not blaming anything on the economic crisis. We just couldn't pay for these things anymore and do everything else.
right.
But,
It's expensive to have your child in school today.
yeah, it is. I can remember cutting those $300 or
If they wanna do
$400
extra
checks for the Model UN. It's
Thank you, Dr.
a
Cohen.
big burden.
Thank you.
I'm good on it.
Okay. There's no other questions?
This is just on section B, correct?
This is just on section B, and there's not a need for a roll call, so.
Yes, there is. Yes. We have course approvals, changes, require roll calls.
So we'll take a roll call.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak? Yes. Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to our operation items. I'd like a motion to combine them, items C1 through C5.
So moved.
Mrs. Shaw, is there a second?
Guess not.
No one
Come
second?
on, go for it.
So moved. Second.
Philip Jack. Are there any questions?
I actually just, hopefully in a little bit of a humorous vein, wanted to point out to Mr. McAvoy that under, I believe it is C3, which is renovations at the high school media center.
Yes.
That we are going to deplete our project allowance.
Yes, we are. That's
with
six,
these
I noticed that
changes.
too. But I was doing so much
So-
talking this evening, I was going to keep my mouth shut.
So anyway, watch those change orders next time, folks.
As long as, back to Park, as long as Dr. Valesky can assure those building principals, primarily Dr. Vanilla and Mr. Suter, that those media centers will be ready. I'm not a building principal, 2 weeks in advance, so that they can bring those Chromebooks and pound out 35, 50 Chromebooks, and all in preparation for that exam. At this point, whatever it costs, Barney, get it done.
Well, Mr. McAvoy, I stand short of making a guarantee,
Yeah.
but I made a statement today that they will be ready on Monday.
Great.
And so we'll see Monday if my statement is accurate.
It'll be accurate. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? I'd like a motion to combine each items, D1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Becker, Mr. Philipchak, is there any discussion? I need a roll call.
Yes. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Going to abstain on D1A. Yes? Anything else?
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes?
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Would like a motion to combine items E1, 2, and 3.
So moved.
Mr. Philipchak, Becker, is there any discussion?
Just note that there is an addendum.
We have an
on page
addendum.
6A.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is actually in regards to the addendum. I understand that this is actually paid for through a grant, but I'm curious as to why we might need grant writing to be completed on a Saturday.
Can you explain the program? 'Cause I think
Actually,
that's-
Mrs. Gulick, would you mind? All right.
The Saturday is for the work to be done. We were recently, just this week, awarded the grant. So it's not grant writing at all. It's actually work to be done to develop a professional development library. It's exciting.
I think it
Well,
was
do
what,
I have
only
egg on my
3
face?
schools, districts got that? Oh,
I'll take it.
For the content development.
great,
Yes, the state put together, we forwarded the press release that says the state awarded money to districts, and you had to compete for the grant, and East Brunswick was selected to develop the content for teacher practice for the state, for all of the people that are going to attend in the summer.
And I think
So-
there were only 3 that got the content.
Only one got teacher practice, it was us. So,
Impressive.
Very impressive.
Are there any other questions on those items? Then we'll take a roll call.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Are there any